Hi, welcome. Hey everybody, welcome to the lecture. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody see my screen? Cool, I'm getting some thumbs up there. Awesome. Fantastic. So yeah, so just to check, so you can see my screen, you should be able to see my my app.js and Emily's trinkets. Does that look and sound good to everybody? Yep, awesome. Okay, cool. So let me just see, let me give people a few more minutes to arrive. I guess we'll just get started just at like 1 or 2 minutes after. And did everybody see the link to the Slido event as well? I'm hoping that's the case. Okay. Okay, so I guess we will get started and just sort of start talking about some introductory things. So today is all about React Router. And React Router, oh, sorry, maybe I shouldn't be sharing this. Sorry. Need to get into here. What do I got? Is there a repo we should download? Yeah, there is. I sent a message out at 10:01 and I will repaste that into the channel here. That is the repo for today. I hope that's generally been working for people, but we'll go through doing that right now. Okay, so yeah, today is all about routing. And so, why do we care about routing? I think it's pretty clear that, routing is a key part of the architecture of a web application. When we think about web applications, one of the main things that we expect to be able to do is to click on a link and for it to take us somewhere, or for us to be able to see a new piece of the UI every time we click on a link. So that's basically why we've got to learn about React Router. And, what do we really mean by navigating to two different pages? I mean, I think there are two possible meanings for this. One of those things is that we could sort of conditionally render a piece of the UI. So you could click on a link and something new appears on the page. Another option is that we are navigating to a new page could mean going from whatever web page you've got open right now, and you could be navigating to somewhere like google.com. And if you're doing something like that, what's really happening is it is a network request is happening. You're serving up a completely new page. So for example, it's like if we go to Maps, for example, we're going to a brand where we're doing a network request, which we can actually see inside of network in the console. As you can see, we're actually like making these particular network requests. But it's also possible to do what this lecture is mainly going to be about, which is client-side routing, which means that what we've done is, as we have initially served up to the user all of the information that they're going to have. It's going to live on the browser. And then when the user starts clicking around our application, what they're really doing is just navigating to different pages inside of our application, and they're not actually generating brand new network requests every single time. And I'm wondering if anybody on Slack can give me any ideas about, why we want to do client-side rendering rather than making network requests all of the time. And I will do and if anybody wants to like pop into that thread, feel free. Awesome. Yeah, it's faster. It's faster. It's more dynamic. That's absolutely right. It's speedier. There's no delay. We're not waiting for any kind of network request. Exactly. Like everybody totally gets the idea there. Okay, so that's great. Okay, so on this, oh yeah, sorry, just gonna kill that bash terminal. Okay, so we are going to have a look at a couple of different things. So there are different ways that we can navigate around the browser. There's something called the location API. And actually we can, if we make this a bit bigger, we can demonstrate this right now. So yeah, basically what we're going to be talking about. So first of all, we're going to look at the DOM APIs. The DOM APIs are what the browser sort of inherently has built into it. And there are two of them that we're going to discuss. One is the location API, which is one of the older APIs. Then more recently, we've got the history API. And the reason that we particularly need to know about the history API is that React Router, this library that we're going to be using, is it's built onto the history API. But if we just want to have a really quick look at things like the location API. So it's like if we just have a look at, if we can all do this, like type into our console in the browser, just on pretty much any page, we can do location. And you'll see that it gives us this, object with lots of different things in it, like a host, which is in our case, localhost 1234. Well, in my case, I don't know if everybody has yet pulled up there, has like downloaded an npm started. That's fine if you haven't, we can do that in a minute. But you could do this on any web page. And it gives us the path name. And I think that last week that things like path name were discussed in terms of like there are different parts of the URL. And today's guided project is all about different parts of the URL and what we can do with those things. So one thing we can do is we can do here are some of the methods that are available to us. There's a location.reload. Or actually, do I mean this? To invoke it? Yeah, so that is giving us that is actually fully reloading the page, but it's actually not heading to anywhere right now. So, oh, well, I haven't got my server started, so that's why. So we could just do it at google.com. So if we're doing like a location.reload, I don't know if you can see that, but it does like a full reload. And again, if we wanted to do something like we can change the, so before we were having a look at, here are some of the things inside it. And so for example, there is our href is google.com, but we can actually just change that to be whatever we want it to be. So we can like reassign that. So we could say, I don't know, any other, we could just give it any other web page we wanted to, basically. So like, I guess I'm making this one up. And this allows us to actually like smash that href and actually change it. So those are some of the basic things that we can do. We can use this for DOM navigation. We can go backward and forward in it. And one of the key things that we should probably do is actually we can have a look at this thing called, let me just drop this into Slack if I can. And if you have a look at this, whenever you feel like it, it is a link to the, this is what an href really looks like. I think that this was brought up again last week as well. So we have our protocol, that's HTTPS. Don't have to worry so much about the auth stuff, so don't worry about that for the moment. And then we have our host, our path, and our hash. And so our host relates to, so up here, this is like our local host, 1234. And our path is anything that is going to come to after this slash here. And the hash is going to be anything that comes even at the end of that. And so this is a really good thing to know about. That's a really useful link to have. So the location API, that's the kind of the oldest API. More relevant to what we're doing right now is the history API. So again, if we pull up the console and we can type in the keyword history. And again, this gives us, just like location, it gives us, we have to go down into some of these things, but basically it gives us like some of the same details as, wait, actually, where is it? I'm looking for Proto. Oh, here it is. There we go. Yeah, we have to go into Proto. But if we go into Proto, that we can see that there are some of the same things that we have seen inside of the location API. And so this should allow us to do things like history.back, for example. Am I not invoking this correctly? Yeah, this allows us to basically go back and forward in the browser by using the built-in API. And it's key to have some knowledge of how this thing works, because this is, as I was saying, this is the API that underlies the React router. So when we actually use React router, what it's doing is it's interfacing with the native history API. So we're going to, we're basically going to be able to use JavaScript to navigate without.
Sorry, I missed that. Could you say it again?
Sorry, hold on, let me just control this off. For some reason, my really old iPhone is thinking that I'm saying Siri to it, but I'm not. Sorry, let me just check where I was. So yeah, so basically you're going to be able to use JavaScript to navigate without causing a full browser reload. And specifically the JavaScript is going to be able to modify like different parts of the URL for us. And that's going to be able to take us to different places in our application. So when we click on buttons and things inside of our application, we can get the path to change and elements of the UI to change without actually causing a reload. And why do we want it to be like this? Well, we want it to be this way so that we can use React Router to render one React component or another React component, depending on the path that we've created using our JavaScript. So yeah, I guess also, what do I mean by the path? I mean that if the path, like if a path is so-and-so, if it looks a particular way, it's going to take us to that particular component and it's going to render that piece of UI. And if it's a different path, it's just going to render a different component. So as you've seen, like history back and history forward, that's going to allow us to link into that navigation to allow us to go back and forward. And there's something that's like even more complicated, which is history.pushState. And this allows us to, for example, it takes 3 arguments. It doesn't really matter for the moment what the first 2 are, but the third one is we can sort of put whatever we want in there. And as you can see up here at the top, it's changed our path up here to be Lady Gaga. Now this is just completely a cosmetic change. It doesn't actually take us anywhere or do anything. It's just that the server just doesn't mind that we've changed the end of the path. But the good thing is we can use JavaScript to manipulate it and do whatever we want with it. So that's basically the key thing that we have with the history API. And yeah, so just to clarify, the difference between this and back-end routing is if we were to highlight our path with the fake URL here, if I now highlight this and I hit enter, what's going to happen is it's going to do a full page reload and it's going to trigger a network request. So, and we're going to get a 404 from that because of course that is just a made up URL, just a made up path that doesn't actually exist. It doesn't go to an endpoint. So, but when we are in the single application world of writing a React application, this is not going to be a problem for us because our server is going to just not care about what the end path says, but our JavaScript on the front end is going to have a look at that, for example, Lady Gaga path, but probably in our app that we're about to do today, we'll call it different things that are more relevant to what we're actually doing. And when that happens, the server isn't going to mind. It's not going to cause a full page reload. It's just going to fetch a different bit of the UI. Okay, so what we're going to need to do in this project, if people have, I'm not sure whether people have as yet npm installed. I mean, yeah, so I mean, one of the, so have people generally like cloned down this thing? Yeah, okay, I'm gonna assume that people have. And so if we go to the package JSON, we should hopefully see that the thing that we're going to be using today, React Router DOM, is there. So if that isn't the case for you, then the thing that you'll want to do is you'll want to do this. I'm not going to do it right now, so because it's already inside of my project, but if it's not, you would want to do npm install React Router DOM. But what I do want to now do is, and I think everybody should do this at this point if you haven't already, so you want to do npm start. So hopefully this will just get our server running on localhost 1234. Okay, it looks like it has. So like, first of all, I guess, let us figure out what the overall goal is for this project. So very happily, our designer has given us some design files. So I would open these up and start having a look around. Okay, so it looks like we're going to be designing a shop application called Emily's Trinkets. And I've gone right to the bottom because it says like, this one doesn't have any more details on it. So I'm going to assume that this is going to be the first page. And then all of the other images in here seem to be more detailed. So I guess let's have a look at these and see what we think is supposed to happen. So it looks like Emily's Trinket starts off as this kind of like landing page, and we can see there's a shop now button, a home button, a shop button. And up here, I think we can see there's the path, it just says localhost 1234. Clearly that's the home location. So then if we come and have a look, I think oh yeah, so here, this is the item list. Now we can see up here that the path has changed, or we've added this item list to it. And what it looks like is that we've got a shop, like a bunch of items. Okay, that's great. So that's going to be the next page, which presumably we navigate to from the shop button. Okay. And then from there, it looks like there is a detail page. So if we click on any one of the items in the shop, as again, we can see the path has changed. So instead of just item list, it's now item list /1, which I'm going to take an educated guess is going to be an ID of our individual items from the item list. So I'm assuming that's 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. And then looks like there are some further details. So there's also on an individual item, we've got some shipping and we've got a description. So that's kind of the flow from the top to the bottom. In terms of the routing, it goes from the landing page with some links that take us to a list of items, and then we should be able to go to an individual item and see the shipping and the description. Okay, so I would say that has given us a pretty good idea of what we're doing, and we know that we're going to have to build out these different lists, like an item list /1, item list /1 /shipping or description. Okay, so I think everybody's got React Router DOM, and now like the key thing is just basically to start setting up our project. So usually a good place to go is index.js. So that's where I would navigate to now. And okay, so it looks like we're given some, oh yeah, so actually here's the thing, here's a good idea. If we search for step, we can see all of the steps in our project. I've just gone to step 1, and I'm going to follow the instruction, which is to import React Router's router. Okay, so to do that, that's a very typical, it's just the imports that we've been doing this whole time. So if everybody could just start doing that, I suspect we know what that looks like. So we're going to import, and then we know that we're going to do it from React Router DOM because that's the thing that we imported into that we added to our package JSON for today. And so the thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be importing something called browser router. But and it's called browser router rather than just router because it's also a hash router. And the hash router is something that attaches to the location API, but the browser router attaches to the history API, which is the one that we want to be using. So we're going to, but because the word browser router is not as nice as just router, we're going to import this browser router as router. So what we're going to do is a bit like when we did styled components, we have this as like as a wrapper, and it wraps our entire app, which means that our whole app gets access to routing, because in this application, we know that all of the pages, we want to have links on all of them. So that's what we're going to do. And the syntax for that is just as you'd imagine, which is that we wrap our app inside of that. And hopefully this should start. Don't need to have that up. Awesome. Okay, so now that, so this is a setup step. So that means that we can probably move on to step 2. And what are we being told to do here? It looks like basically we just need to, it's saying React router imports route, link, and switch. Okay, so these are obviously utilities that come with React router. So we're just going to import those in the way that we normally do import things. So let's do it. So like import, and we can just leave that blank for a second, from React router DOM. And we're going to import exactly what it told us to import: route, link, and switch. Okay, cool. So then step 3, it looks like it's telling us to make links to navigate us home and navigate us to the shop. That's cool. I can see that there, oh, oops. Sorry about that. Hold on. As we can see at the moment, like the only thing we've got up is Emily's trinkets. We know we want a home link and a shop link. So let's do that. And the syntax for this looks like this. So we create a link, and a link is this of course comes from the thing that we've just imported, and it's just another React component that's going to be rendered inside of our app component. So it's just a link. And actually we know that we're going to have 2 of these. So there are our links, and we know that one of them is going to take us to home and the other one is going to take us to shop. Can I just check with everybody, is that working for everybody so far? How's that looking for people? Looking good? Okay, cool. So the syntax to take something home is, so basically link takes a prop called to, and the to prop, it's looking for a path. So in this case for the home, we know that the typical syntax to go home is always like just like in a root directory, it's just that root, that /. And that really shouldn't sort of do anything. We're already on the home page, if anywhere. And for our link to the shop, well, let's go back. We can go back to those design files and remind ourselves what that was called. It looks like the shop was called item list. So we know that we want to go to, so we know that that's going to be the next part of our path. So that is /, that's 2. Items list. Okay, cool. So now what happens if we click on our shop? It takes us to the item list in the browser, but we haven't actually told it to render anything yet, because that's going to be kind of our next step. And so let's have a look and see what else is going on in this file. So basically, as we can see, we've got these, we have these different components up here on lines 6, 7, and 8. We've got our home, our item list, and our item. And so we need to build out, we need to actually, we've set up our links already, and now we just need to build out our routes to all of those places. And I think the idea is that we have this, let me see, it looks like we've got this single slice of state, which is going to be stock. And we are then using this helper up here, this fetch stock helper, which is going to sort of simulate an Axios request. And it's going to go through and pick up this data. And now we can actually have a look at this data. Why can't I get to it? So our data is in here. And basically here's just some fake data. We don't have an Axios request. It's just on our client side. So that's fine. And oh yeah, all of those things contain like a picture URL and everything that we're going to need to actually make our shop work. So so yeah, inside our use effect hook, we're taking this fetch stock, and we're going to be setting into state this this array of objects. And as you can see, it starts off as an empty array. So one question is, did the, what I'd like everybody to answer in Slack is, has the data made it into state? And we can already tell that by opening up our components, DevTools, and having a look. And as we can see, it's correctly, this fetch stock helper has correctly fetched all of our data, and our use effect has now put it into state. So we know that we've got access to it, even though it's not rendering anywhere. Okay, so the next thing we want to do then is actually build out step 4 as it's telling us to do. So the instruction is saying build a switch with a route for each of the components imported at the top. But I think to start with, let's just build out the routes, but without building the switch. And so we know that the first one is going to be home, because that was the first link that we built. And the route takes, in the same way that link takes a prop of 2, the route takes a prop of path. And so for home, the path is going to be exactly what you would think it would be. Oh, sorry, equals, and then /, because that is our home one. So I would like in Slack if everybody could try to do the same thing for the next component, which is items list. So if everybody could just write an items list route and drop it into Slack, that would be great. Oh no, I'm sorry. I just realized that Slido is broken. Okay, so. If everybody could, if anybody would like to build out the items list and drop it there. And let me see. So it looks like Slido is broken. I'm not really sure what to do about that. Okay, this is all looking really great in terms of the items list. That's fantastic. Just while some more of these come in, I feel like maybe I can. I'm wondering if there are any TLs here who are in Slido, if they could have a look. and see what's going on in Slido. That would be really great. But if not, I'm really sorry about that. Maybe we can just post any question. I'll ask people to post questions in the channel. Really sorry about Slido not working. Probably my fault, is the first time I've used it. Okay, so okay, so it looks like I'm gonna take this one from Christopher. Like that looks exactly right. It looks like lots of people have got that, no problem. What's that? Do you mind updating the VS code? Yeah, I'm also really sorry about that. The VS code, I'm also gonna have to drop into Slack the code that we've currently got, which I can do no problem. Oh, and it's hard to see. Okay, good to know about all these technical issues. So I'm gonna drop that in now. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I did not realize that was hard to see, and I don't know how to zoom in really. Is that better? Is that clearer? I'm hoping that that's a bit easier to read. Okay, I'm sorry that everything was so small. And yeah, I'm sorry. I should have made an announcement of that at the beginning, but I completely forgot to. I do not have the git fetch and git reset thing working right now, but what I will do is I'll periodically drop into Slack where my current VS Code files are. And I'll make sure that it is updated, that it's updated from GitHub at the end. So after the lecture, you will be able to grab it as well. And you'd like me to zoom in even more? I'm so sorry. I did not realize it was really small. Like, how is that? Is that any better? I'm sorry about these technical issues. Okay. All right, so where was I? We were looking at building out the second items list path. So I think we can drop that in now. Yeah, looks like lots of people got that right. So that of course goes here. And okay, great. So if we go to the shop, oh no, we have an error, and it actually looks like it is a classic error, which is saying cannot read property map of undefined. So this is a hint to us that we need to be looking in our items list component. So let's pull that up. And seeing that, and this is a very typical thing, if you see something like cannot read property map of undefined, that's usually a really good hint that the child component is expecting props that the parent component is not passing to it. So let's go into app, and well, actually, sorry, back to items list. What is it expecting? We can see that items list is expecting prop of items. So that means that when we create this, we know that we need to be giving items list when we render it some items. And then for the moment, we can just to fix the error, we can just pass in whatever we want, just an empty array. And this should now be working in terms of so if we click on shop, I think it's now going to, I don't think it's going to break anymore. As you can see up here, what's great is, and this is a success, it's taking us to items list. Even though it's not rendering the items list that we want yet, we have actually successfully used JavaScript to manipulate the path. So that's good. Okay, so hopefully that's working for everybody else right now. So it doesn't just, of course, we know that it doesn't just want to take an empty array. We know that what we need is some data. So do we have any data in state lying around that we could feed to items list? Does anybody want to drop into Slack? Oh yeah, can I also send changes to index.js? Yes, I can. I'm sorry about that. I'm so sorry about that. So index.js, not that one. Yes, okay, it looks like people have got that. That's right. We can put stock into our app.js, and I think we can probably figure out, so items is going to be stock. Okay, great. So let's check the browser. Oh, cool. So we're actually now rendering our stock list. Hopefully that's working for other people. So yeah, what we have the thing that we've just written, with like just recovering the things that we just did, the really key things here are creating the links, and then creating the routes. If you know just this much about React Router, you have the capacity to do most of the things that you're going to need to do. You'll already be able to like use this in an application navigating around. So really this is the key substance of the lecture. It's creating links, providing them the to prop, and then creating routes and providing them the correct path prop. So just to recap everything that we've done, we've imported the React router, and that was in index.js. We wrapped our entire app in the router. And then in our app, we used these links, where are they again, to just cosmetically change the path inside of here. And then we used the routes to actually really to navigate to those different components and get them to render. So that's what we've done so far. And then before we go on a break, which I realize I'm already a bit late for, a final point that I just want to make is about the exact prop. So the reason why we're currently seeing both of these two things here is because there is a prop that we can give to route. And if we do this, we should only see home should just be home and shop should be shop. And that's because if we don't give it this exact prop, then when basically anything that matches this / is going to be rendered. And because the home page is always going to have that / it's always going to be rendered. So if we use the exact prop, then we can keep those things separate. Okay, and I will give you a 5-minute break. Okay, so we are back. So there's just, I think I saw one question in Slack, and somebody else, actually, it looks like Slido might be working now. So, I mean, if anybody else wants to submit questions in there, feel free to give that a go, because I can see one like test question in there. So thank you very much for whoever did that. And somebody's asking, are the links and routes usually on our main app page? And I would say that's really just a question of where you are in your kind of application building. So when you very first get started, of course, you're only going to have a very small, like the way that components build is you don't sort of build them all at once, you build them sort of like one after the other. And what that means is that it's actually very sensible to start off having the links and the routes in whichever component you need them to be in. And so at the very start of an application, it might be in the app. Now, it might be the case that once we start building out more and more, a lot of that logic would be moved down into wherever, wherever it was necessary. And actually, we're going to see a case of some of that nested rendering, so that those nested routes, which only apply to a certain part of the application a little bit later down the line, because as we saw at the beginning, when it comes to the description and the shipping, the only components that need to know those details, the only components that need to have any knowledge of the shipping and the description bits of the UI is the item itself. So there's no need to have all of those routes defined at a higher level. Things should always be defined at the level at which they're needed, so that your whole application doesn't hold too much data in any one part of the application. Okay, so, and then I think somebody was, okay, so I guess I should put this back into, hopefully this is updated and useful. Okay, so so the last thing that we were talking about is using this exact path, because if we don't use this exact prop, then anything that is matching this this / is going to be rendered. And of course, that's going to be everything, because all of the paths start off with that /. So if we remember at the top, we actually imported this other thing called a switch. It's another utility from the React Router DOM library. And so now we're going to see what the use case for this is. And this is going to allow us to avoid using the exact path, because of the way that it works. So we're going to put in a switch, and our switch wraps the rest of our routes if we want it to. And as you can see, we're back to this thing where on the home page, we just get the home, and hopefully now it should work if we go to the shop page. Wait, just kidding. That doesn't seem to be working right now. We should be getting this. Actually, I do know why it's not working now. It's because the way that the inherent way that the switch works is that it starts off with, it selects only the very first path that matches. Whichever one of those it matches, that is what wins, and that's what renders. And because here, because everything has this like very unspecific / the home does and the items list does, that means the switch means that only the very first one of those will render. So that means that we have to swap these around. And now it should be the case that we have the home and the shop are rendering separately. So that's always the pattern to be using with the switch. Okay, so as we can see from from our components, the only one of these that we haven't created a route for is item, but actually we're not going to do that just now. We're going to tackle our next step. We're going to look for step 5. So if we have a look at step 5, let's see what it is telling us to do. Okay, so step 5 is saying to us, we have to build a click handler that will imperatively navigate us to the website base URL / the items list. And as we can see from this home component, that what's really happening here is that there is a button, and the button says shop now, and it has a click handler here, which is the thing that we're going to make. So what we're going to do now is, instead of like declaring, so previously in app we wrote we wrote these like declarations, but now we're going to do something more imperative. We're going to write a click handler to do it. And you might be wondering why we can't just keep it simple and just like declare our routes. The reason we don't always want to do that, even though it doesn't necessarily make sense here, is because we want to do things a bit more programmatically. So sometimes it might be the case that if a user is not logged in, they shouldn't have access to a particular page. And it's the kind of logic that we're going to see in this imperative navigation, which would allow us to determine whether or not somebody would be authorized to go to a particular part of the web application. And for this, we're going to be importing our first hook of the day, because that's going to help us actually like imperatively move around. And this is the thing that most closely resembles the history DOM API that we had a look at right at the beginning. So we're going to do this in the way that we always do, which is we're going to import from React Router DOM. And we're going to import something called use history. And in order to use this hook inside of a React component, we just invoke it very, very simply. So we need to get, so we are inside our component. So, and the way that we do that is we're going to say const history, oh, not with a capital though, const history equals, I'm so sorry. Once again, when I say that word, my phone thinks I'm saying something else. I'm sorry. So we have our use history, and we just invoke it. And what this is going to enable us to do is actually invoke is use history.push inside of here. And so this is going to be very similar to the history API, where we were able to do things like history.pushState, and we gave it two arguments, null, null, and like a third argument. But now we're actually able to just push the route that we want straight into it. And if we remember from app, well, actually, wait, let's just go home for a second. So here is the button that we're trying to click into. And we want it to do the same thing as this shop button. We want it to take us to the same place. And we know that the path that we want to push is this items list here. So we can just do that quite easily by just pushing it in like so. So if we go back home, and if we go to shop now, we can see that it's doing the same thing. And if we want to see what this history thing is, we can console log history. And you can see that it has these methods that we would want to see on it. So that's go, which we can give it an argument where it will go to that particular place. We can give it a number like -1 to take us back one page. We have our go back, which just if we invoke that, it goes back. Go forward goes forward. And push, which was like the push state that we saw from earlier. So that's basically what our history does. And you can see that we have we have been able to like route imperatively. I have to stop saying that word. So this does seem more complex than the link thing that we were doing before the break, but there are things that you can do in this imperative way that you can't do with a more simple link. And that's one of the main things that I was mentioning there, was just the fact that we can do things like check if somebody is authorized to be on a particular page. We can include some more logic into this sort of click handler to say, hey, like only somebody in this situation should be allowed to go here. So actually I'm going to drop some more information into here so that when you guys download this from GitHub later, it can be, you will see this. And actually I will just update this file right now. So that should also be in Slack. Okay. If you don't quite see the distinction between imperative and declarative right yet, it doesn't matter, because ultimately what's going to happen is that you're going to be able to just practice doing this, and you'll soon get the hang of kind of which one is which. Why one is declarative, because you're very simply like declaring something, and why one is imperative, because you're telling it how to do something. Okay, so I'm seeing a question in Slido, which I'll check really quickly. It says, is history a keyword? Or if you called it something else, you import use and whatever you call it. I'm not quite sure I understand the second half of that question, but yeah, history is a keyword. Oh, I see. If we're talking about history on line 9, no, we're calling it history here because that's a word that makes sense to us. So history is a keyword inside of the history API, which is like a native DOM API. But right here, when we are calling, we're making.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you. Could you please repeat what you said?
See if I can turn this off. That's just the name that we're calling it. We could have called it anything we wanted it to. Okay, so looks like we've now done that. So we can move on to step 6. What does our step 6 tell us to do? So remember earlier we said in app that there was a final route that we needed to create, and that was, so we have our item list, but we don't yet have our item, and that's the next thing that we need. So let's see. Step 6, I think, is going to make us create this final route. And yeah, so this should take us from our items list to any given item that we happen to click on. So the first thing to do is to check that our items list is getting the right props to it. I mean, we know that it is, otherwise none of these things would be rendering. But what we can do is we can also have a look at the components in the dev tools to have like a closer look to see what is. So wait, where are we? And we can see in our items list and our dev tools that we do indeed have everything. And what's interesting about this is that if we click into any one of these things, we can see that one of the properties that any individual item has is an ID. So that's going to be good to know when we want to change our path up here to take us to a particular ID. Okay, so what's it telling us to do here? It's saying that we want to, so our link starts and it's going to navigate us from our current URL to the current URL plus an extra bit of the path beyond the slash, which is going to be the ID of the item. Okay, so, and we can see this as an image, and this image obviously corresponds to these individual images up here. So the first thing I think we want to do then is I think we want to wrap our entire image in a link, because we know that we want to make those images into links. So that means I think that we need to import link from React Router DOM, just like we did in app. Link from React Router DOM. And so now we can linkify this image. And we do that like so. I'll just drop that into Slack real quickly as well. I'm just threading it onto the bottom of the previous one that I did. Okay, so that's items list, the most recent iteration. And as we know that a link, it has to have a to prop, and the to prop is going to be that, that path that we want. So we know that, so that's going to look like this. So we're going to give it a to prop, and that's going to be equal to this path, items list. Okay, so here is a problem. So we know from our, we know that if we, from our design spec, we know that the path to this particular view has got to be an item list, but then it has to have this /1, which is the ID. So the question is then, how do we get that ID to like dynamically pop up there every time we click on a different image? And as you can see that we're already inside of this .map, which is taking an item, and this item has got access to an item ID. And we know that all of those objects come complete with an ID, and they come complete with an image URL and a name. So we should have access to the data that we need. So what we can do is we can just use string interpolation inside of our path, inside of our to prop. And we know that we should have item.id inside of there. Okay, so has everybody made this link here? I just like hopefully this is working. And just put that in Slack if I could get some thumbs up, just to show that that aspect of it is working for hopefully the majority of people. Yeah, so do we need the backticks? So yeah, looks like I might have forgotten the backticks. Thank you so much. That's an amazing catch. Yeah, so I completely forgot about that. We actually, of course, now that we're doing this dynamically, we do need to wrap this. I only did one part of the string interpolation. We do need to have it inside of here. So thank you, that's a great catch. I totally didn't see that. Okay, so here we go. Here is the actual correct thing, or at least I now hope that's correct. Okay, so now what should be happening is if we are clicking on any of these things, like let's see what happens if we do that. Oh, and actually, I'm so sorry. I've actually forgotten like another, I think I may have forgotten one other part of this, which is a final missing /, which is very critical. Okay, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Okay, well, actually, it is definitely time for another 5-minute break. So what I will do is I will have a look and see what's wrong with this. And at that time, in that time, we can have our second 5-minute break. Hey everybody, so we are back and I can see there are a few things in Slido. So, okay, so let's have a look at one of these. So somebody is saying my shop now button goes to a blank page, but the route is correct. Can you go over the steps we took for that button again? Yeah, definitely I can do that. So why don't we do that now? So I think that was in home.js. So, the steps that we took for that. So what we're doing here is we're using the history. We're using the use history hook from React Router DOM, and we import that onto into that component. And then on line 9, we're going to invoke use history, and I don't know if you remember, but when we invoked use history, I think we also console logged it. That's right, we console logged it here. And we were able to see that that history object had all different kinds of methods on it. And in our application, we're calling the invocation of that, we're calling it history. That's the name that we're giving it. And so one of the methods that is attached to the history object is push. And what that does is it allows us to give a path to this method push. And then whenever this click handler here is invoked, it's going to navigate us to whatever path this is. So it's going to take us from wherever it's going to sort of add this onto the overall path and take us there. And so what happens is that the on click on the button, which is home, this one here, it actually has this route to shop click handler on it. I'm hoping that answers your question. If it doesn't, come back in office hours and we can talk more about that afterwards. And then the other one is, can you review imperative routing again used in home.js? I'm confused on how the routing is working through the history object. I guess I also just covered that as well, but I can maybe go over it again later at the end to sort of do more of a comparison between imperative and declarative. But yeah, basically, I think if we pull up the console real quick, and so we have on line 12, we've console logged the history object. And this is this history object that we brought in through the use history hook, it has all of these different methods on it. And we are able to invoke these methods, and one of those methods is push. And that allows us to give it an argument, like, for example, a path, and it will push the whatever path we give it and allow us to navigate there. So that is that. Okay, so where were we? I think we had just finished off finally getting the correct, and thank you for people who pointed out the error that I made. I forgot to fully interpolate the string there on, this is back in items list. So hopefully this is now working for people. I did drop this file as it now is correctly working for me into Slack. So if anybody wants to pick it up from there, feel free to do so. So one thing I wanted to show you about that is the change that this has now made is if we now click on any of these items, even though we're not rendering any new pieces of UI, what you should be seeing is up here, the path now has got an additional part to it. And what it has is it has the ID. So we know that we are definitely correctly selecting these things. And yeah, we haven't yet built out the route. And we know that we haven't done that because that was something that we did not do. We left it from a previous step 3 or 4. And so that is probably the thing that we should be doing now. So the syntax for this final slash of the path is something that is definitely worth knowing because you're going to see it happen a lot. So let's start to build out this final route. And we know that the thing that we're trying to render is item. So we're going to invoke that item component. And we know that because it's a route, we need to give it a prop. And that prop is a path prop. So that's the typical syntax. That is path equals, and then we're going to give it whatever it is that we want. And if we go back to the base URL, items list file here, we can see that we know that we want it to be localhost 1234 / items list / whatever the ID is. Okay, so let's give it that. So it's / items - list. And then we know that we needed to give it the ID. And the way that we do this is we do colon, and we can call this parameter here anything we want, but I'm going to call it item ID. And the key thing to know is that it takes a colon and then it takes the ID. And this is the final slash of the path. Okay, so if we go to the shop and let's see what happens, and then we click on an item, and we can see that it is giving us, it's taking us correctly to the correct item's ID, but it's not actually rendering anything yet. And when things aren't rendering things like that, we don't have to worry about it for the moment, because we know that we do have some code that's going to render ultimately. And the thing that we care about right now is just checking that our routing is working, which it is, so it's fine. So we are going to now have a look at the second hook of the day. The first hook that we looked at was was back here, the use history hook. So that was hook number 1, and that allowed us to programmatically navigate around by pushing on paths like item list to history. The second one that we're going to have a look at is something called use route match. And the reason so this is maybe the trickiest hook of the day, and the reason we are going to do it is because it allows us to avoid some repetition when we are writing many routes. We don't have that many routes in this piece of code, so it's not such a big deal. But here is the idea of use route match, so that when you're writing a more complex thing than this, you will have this particular tool to use. So of course, as always, the first thing we do is we're going to import it. So where is that? Wait, sorry. So yeah, let's go back to step 6. Okay, that's where we need to be. So we've already imported link and so yeah, we are in items list right now. So we want to also import use route match into here. And the way that we kind of get access to this is, so with use history, that particular hook was just a function. We could just invoke it. With this one, we have to do something. What it actually returns, use route match, is it's an object, and we want to destructure that object to take something out of it. So we're going to take out, and do const URL, because that's the item that we want to take out of it, from use route match. And so this should now give us the URL. And we're going to include this URL by interpolation in the link, which will navigate us from the current URL to the ID of the item. Okay, so that means that we should need to go back to our link down here. And so now instead of just specifying that it's items list, what we can do is, again, using string interpolation, we're going to use this URL. because we've brought it in from here. And what that does, what this hook does, is it actually just grabs the current URL of wherever you are, of wherever this is actually rendered. So because this component is items list, it's going to grab the items list URL. And this is obviously more useful if you need to be writing like many links and many routes, which we're not really doing right here, but ultimately this will save you time. And so let's see if we go back home and we go to the shop, and we can see that everything is working exactly as it was before. It's giving us the same, we have the same path up here, items list. But instead of just hard coding it in, we've programmatically pulled it from this hook, use route match. Okay, so I will now take a second to check Slido just to make sure see if there's anything else here. Somebody is saying, how is item ID working in the route? That's a very fair question. I feel like we're going to keep talking through that and see how that eventually ends up working. So I won't separately answer that. I'll see if like doing the next steps as we move on to step 7 will hopefully start to clear up how the item ID : works. Okay, so that means we are ready to do step 7. So let's just basically have a look at the instructions for step 7. They seem to be like fairly extensive. So let's just start taking a look at them and reading it. And what it's saying is, it's saying, okay, so we need to pull items. We need to pull item from items using a parameter in the URL. And so whoever was asking about the : item ID working, that's exactly what we're going to move on to and have a look at now. Sorry, to get a bit more, I should take a step back and say, actually, what is step 7 all about? So step 7 takes us into back into item. And so this is going to start rendering things like item details and that kind of thing. So that's really what we're doing. And so we've also got some more information up here that says we get all of our items through props, and we will use the URL to find out which item is the one to show. Because what we currently don't have is, even though we have in our shop, when we go through to a particular item, it's not actually showing up. So we need to make that final connection. And this is probably a good time to have the parent component open as well. So if I split my VS Code, I'm pretty sure that we know that the parent component for item is, well, actually it's going to be items list, isn't it? So let's pull that up. So we have these two things open. And yeah, having this technique of having the parent, which is calling the child, open at any one time, allows us to see if the parent component is passing down data in the form of props in the specification that's actually required by the item, the child component. So let's have a look. So carrying on with the instructions. So we need to have sorry, just give me one moment. Okay, sorry, I'm having an issue here with some of my things. So even though it is a bit early, I'm going to take another just couple minute break just while I fix some things. So everyone just gets a break, have a think about things for a second. I'm just having an issue with some of my things, so we will come back in just a minute, in just 2 minutes. Okay, sorry about that. I was honestly just getting slightly lost as to where I was with these steps, and I wanted to make sure I could figure it out so I could hopefully explain it to you. So let us go back to our home and our shop. And basically the idea now is just to remind everybody where we are is that we are still not rendering the UI for the item itself. And we know that we need to pull the item from items, and we know that we need to be using a parameter that we have found in the path in the URL, and we know that the final thing that we need to do is to link up the parameter that we already have happily sitting in our URL with rendering our component using that parameter. So that means that it is time to use our final hook of the day. And our final hook is use params. So again, we're just going to import that from React Router DOM. Import use params from React Router DOM. And we use this particular hook in a very similar way to the way that we were using use route match. Just like use route match, it's what we actually get from this utility is an object with lots of different methods and information on it. So let us do that in the same way. So we're going to do, I think we're going to do const item ID. And we're going to pull this from use params. And we're going to invoke that. And what basically happens here is that use params has the ability to go into a path and find out what the final, find out what the path says and give us back to us the bit of the path that we want so that we can link it up. So now we have both imported it, and we are now destructuring use params, and we're bringing this into our project. And if we want to have a look at what that looks like, we can actually console log it. So I think that's a good idea to do. We can console log item ID. And as you can see up here, we have, it is 0 because that is the one that we're currently on. And if we're to go back and select a different one, we get item with an ID of 1. So now we've pulled out of our params in our path, we've pulled out the individual ID that we've won, and now we actually have it inside the scope of our item. So now we're going to be able to actually link all of these things up. So if we now go back to our line 38 of our app.js, let's have a look at that. So we can see, so somebody was asking like how item ID is working in the route. And this is the way that it's going to be working, is that this is the way that it links up. We're going to be able to pull whatever that number is, we're going to be able to pull it out inside of our item component. And we now have to define an item so that our item can render the image, name, and price right down in this render statement, where in this return statement where we're actually like rendering the HTML. So does anybody know how we would take the item and iterate over the item, which is an array, and return the correct item ID that we want? I'm not quite sure if I've put that well enough, but let me go into Slack and see if I can ask the question. Okay, so I'll give people a couple of minutes to have a think about how we might pull how we might define an item so that we can render the image, name, and price. And while we do that, I will just take a look at any other questions I'm getting. Oh, I'm seeing okay, cool. So I'm seeing that a use route match is not defined, but someone's figured that out. And what else is happening on Slido of anything? Okay, nothing. So yep, I will give people a minute to take a look at that. Yeah, and sorry, just to be, oh God, sorry, I haven't started my timer. Okay, so I don't know that I saw any answers to my question, which is entirely my fault. It means I did not ask a good enough question. What I was trying to get at is that we have on line 17, we have this item declaration up here. And in our return statement, we've got we know that we're going to return our item.image URL, our item.name, and our item.price. And so we have to figure out a way to define it so that it can define items so that it can render. And so the way that I would do that is I have my const item equals, and so I'm going to be taking items dot find, because we are in an array, so we can use an array method, and it's going to take an item and what we want to do is we want to return an item ID if that item ID is the same as the ID that we have pulled from our path from use params. Oh. Equals item ID. Okay, let's see if this is now working. Oh no, I seem to have an error. I'm not quite sure what that is. Cannot read property find of undefined. Oh yeah, I think maybe I have incorrectly done this. Nope. Okay, I'm not entirely sure what pretty sure that I have got an error here because I'm not correctly rendering this. I don't know if anybody's able to spot where I have a typo here. My item is undefined, but it shouldn't be. I'm still not quite sure what I'm missing here. Let me get rid of some other things. Interesting. Oh, did I pass items into the item component in app.js? Maybe I did not. That's a very good call. And no, it looks like they have not been passed in. So can anybody tell me what they think I should be passing in here? Okay, cool. So I'm getting some answers like items equals stock. I guess let's give that a go and see if that's what I should be doing. Let's go back to item and let's see. Nope, it does not look like, it doesn't look like that was the right thing necessary to pass in. So does anybody else have any other ideas about what it might need? Items. Yeah, I'm not seeing what I should be passing in. I think you're right that it should be items equals stock. That definitely seems right. And then in here, I should be having, what should work is, oh, okay, I'm so sorry. I think I see what the issue is. I think the issue that we're having is not that we're passing in, the props have now been corrected, so that is a good thing, but it's crashing because what is happening is that the find array method is not actually finding anything on the first render because it's an empty array. But we can fix this by just giving this an empty or object, I believe. Okay, great. Thank goodness, that was the right thing. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so I think what was happening there is that basically there was, even though we were passing in the correct props, because somebody had reminded me that that's what we needed to do, when on the very first render, it was crashing because it starts off in state as an empty array. And because then the empty array, basically the item.image URL, item.name, item.price, none of those things are defined. So we can avoid that by just passing in an empty object, which is fine. It doesn't null out. It's just like, okay, that's an empty object, no problem. And so now we are able to actually go into the shop and click on any of these items, and it takes us to where we want to be. Okay, so let us now have a look at step 8. And I think all of the final steps are in the item.js file. So I will really quickly on Slack, I will, yeah, that's right. Somebody's like, it's trying to get data before it loads. That's true. Okay, so I'm just going to update item.js. And app.js as well. Okay, so those should be the correct things for item and app. Okay, so step 8, what is step 8 telling us to do? It says, okay, so here go the nav links to current URL shipping and current URL description. That's right, because if we remember back in our design files, we know that we have to have a description and we know that we have to have shipping. Those are two different components that every single item has got to have. Fine. So, but what it's saying to us is that we're not going to necessarily be using regular links. We're going to be using something called a nav link. And a nav link is, in fact, incredibly similar to a link, but it's just yet another way of doing something. So it's an important thing to know about, because ultimately, like, a nav link is going to have a bit more, it's going to carry a bit more data. It has a bit more self-awareness, but it's very similar really to a regular link. But we're going to give nav links a go. So the next thing we're going to do is import nav links. So that's nav link. And we can make nav links in a very similar way to that we were making regular links. So that looks like this. We're going to have a nav link for shipping. And we know we're also going to have a nav link for a description. Let's check our app is still working. And for the moment, that's not working, but I think it's going to be fine. Because our links are not actually going anywhere. So, and we know that we want to our nav link, because they're links, just like regular links, they're going to take 2 props. And if we go back to our design file and we see that the ultimately where we want it to be is we want it to be localhost port 1234/item list / the ID of whichever item we're currently clicking on / shipping. And presumably the same thing is going to be true for the description as well. So we know that one thing that we could do is we could just hard code in the item list, but previously we managed to use route match in order to get that URL that we want. So that means that we can actually come and do a use route match to get the relevant URL. So we can then import that up on line 3. And then we need to invoke that inside of our function, inside of our component, so that we have access to what it is that we want. And in this case, we know that we want the URL. And so we're just once again doing our use route match invocation. And so now inside of our item component, we have access to this item called URL, which means that we can use it. And this time not forgetting the string interpolation, so we can use our URL. We want to do the same thing for description. And then we know that this one is going to be / shipping, and this one is going to be / description. So that's great. So we have our dynamic interpolated URL, and we've once again used that use route match hook so that we don't have to be typing out long, complicated URLs. We've just grabbed that URL from the current place that we are. So in that case, it is if we're in shop and we go to item, we can see that it's able to grab up here the whole of the URL, the path name that we want. And as you can see, it is now rendering our shipping and our description. So what's good about that is we've created our links, and now we're just going to basically repeat the pattern that we did previously. And we are going to just put in our routes. So actually, I'm going to give you the opportunity to attempt to construct those routes. Like, I will get it started, and then I'll give you guys like a couple of minutes to see if you can construct your own routes. And so actually, first of all, have we, so the very first thing that we're going to have to do before we forget is to import route. And then under step 9, it's saying, here go the routes for the current path / shipping and current path / description. And these routes should render item details. So let's go and have a look into item details and see what it is that it is. And it's basically just it is something which is taking props. So we just have to be mindful that whenever we invoke our item details, they will be taking props. Okay, so, and we know that the kind of props that they're taking is, of course, it's taking the text, because that's what it tells us in item details. If I can get back there, in item details, it's telling us that it is expecting us to be passing down a prop of text. Okay, so our first route is going to look something like this. And we know that we're going to be rendering item details, and I'm going to close that up. And we know that it is taking a prop of text. And we know that the route needs a path prop. And I'm wondering if anybody on Slack can tell me how you think that we are going to, like what path prop we should be giving our shipping invocation. Oh yeah, that's great. So we've already got somebody who is still there. So like Christopher looks like has got a good answer there. That looks exactly right, I think. Let me see what you actually. Oh, so actually, yeah. So what's interesting about that is I think that because I think that actually will work, because in this case, our URL is going to be the same thing as the path. But so actually, yeah, let's give that a go. And does anybody know can anybody drop into Slack what our text prop should be? Nice. Okay, thank you, Chaz. That looks great. So that's going to be items.shipping. So hopefully that will work. So this is not quite working yet, and I think I know what the reason for that is. And I think if we go up to, I'm trying to remember where we had this the first time. Let's have a look. Is it home? Item. I think that what we actually are going to need here is not the URL, but because this is the path prop, we're going to need the path instead. So another thing that we can pull out of use route match is not just the URL, but the path. So we can add in the path here on line 10. And instead of the URL, we're going to get the path. Let's see if that fixes what we are expecting. Okay, yeah, so we haven't quite got that working yet. But in any event, I will give you guys just a minute or two to have a look at what to write your own route for the description as well, following on the same pattern. So I'll give you guys like a couple of minutes to do that. Okay, yeah, so thank you so much, Chaz, for catching that typo that I totally didn't see when I copied and pasted. So yeah, on line 47, I think it was, that we had text equals items.shipping. Of course, it is item.shipping. And so now, of course, it is working. So as I think probably everybody has by now done, we can also do exactly the same thing for the description. Making the changes to description, and hopefully that should work. Okay, so it looks like we have got all of the elements of our application doing what we expect them to be doing. And so let me just see what is. And so, yeah, I think that is covering all of the things that I have. I will now have a look on, so first of all, what I will do is I will copy like the current version of item over so that everybody in Slack has got the most recent version of that. And I will, of course, put this whole thing on GitHub later so that you have it, so you can like download it in the normal way, and I'll make sure that my GitHub system is fixed for tomorrow so I don't have to be dropping things into Slack. But yeah, for the moment, are there any other files that people like don't currently have the up-to-date working version of? What's people's like general sense of their project? Have people got it working? I'll ask in Slack. Thumbs up or thumbs down to that would be really great. Okay, cool. Okay, so it looks like somebody, yeah, so the thing is I do have a step 10 in here, but I actually think that, yeah, so what we effectively, I kind of conflated step 9 and step 10 essentially, because we were using both the path and the URL from, where is it? From use route match on line 10. And what we can do is we can definitely console log. It's probably a good idea to do that to see the difference between the URL and the path. So let's do that. Because I think somebody else had in Slido, which is a very reasonable question. So let's do console log URL. And then also path, and of course everybody should follow along and do this as well. Okay, so if we go back to home, and shop now. Okay, so I don't know how clear it is. I don't know how clear this is to see, but maybe I'll try and make this a bit clearer by doing capitals. Okay, yeah, so I don't know if you can see here, but we've console both the URL and the path. And so the basic difference between them is that for the URL, that is something that we're going to be pulling out of use route match to make it easier to write the to prop. So if you remember that the link and the nav link, both of those components, those router components, require a to prop. And so the way that we can use this hook, this use route match hook, to find out exactly what that param is, we can put in URL. And now I know that, like, technically speaking, that's not a URL. It's actually like a part of a path, but to distinguish it from path, it gets called URL. And so the URL is for the to prop for link nav. I'll actually just write that. I'll actually like write that in here to make it really clear. So I'll just drop that in there. And then for the path, this is all about making the route easier. To write the path prop. So yeah, that's the basic difference. It's like the you have links and nav links, and you have routes, and they both take different props. So use route match enables you to use both the URL and the path, and the URL is used as the to prop for nav and link and nav link, and the path enables you to write the correct path in the route. So that's why that was true about step 10. I kind of conflated step 9 and step 10. So on lines like 49 and 53, we're using that path prop that we've pulled out of use route match. And so yeah, that is all of the steps 1 through 10. And yeah, so are there any other questions in Slack or on Slido? Let me just see. So I was confused about the empty object and the array problem. Can we console log and see what's happening? Yeah, that's a really good question. Let me just see where that was. I'm sorry. Yeah, I did not sufficiently explain that very well. Maybe instead of taking up more time now, because it's 1 o'clock, that's something to cover in office hours. I'll let Gabe know that I did not explain that sufficiently well for you guys, and he will hopefully cover it at that point. Thank you everybody very much for coming to this lecture. And yeah, I will see you all later.